I think God used infertility to address these lies that I had about motherhood, to get me to the place where I wanted kids. I went from like, no, they're going to ruin my life, my body, my marriage, all that, like to the longer I didn't have them, the more I wanted them. And then the more I was like, wait, why do I feel like they would ruin my life? Where is this coming from? And I feel like that's where God could answer and bring his truth.
You're listening to God Hears Her, a podcast for women where we explore the stunning truth that God hears you, He sees you, and He loves you because you are His. Find out how these realities free you today on God Hears Her.
Welcome to God Hears Her. I'm Eryn Adkins. For this conversation, I had the privilege of talking with Alice Matagora. We recorded this conversation while we were at the 2023 MomCon conference in Chicago. Alice and her husband walked through 7 years of infertility together. While they were walking through those years, she learned multiple lessons that prepared her for motherhood and healed parts of her personal journey. So let's kick it off by asking Alice who she was as a little girl.
Well, Alice, as a little girl, you can't see me, but I am second generation Taiwanese American. So my parents were immigrants. They immigrated over here. I was born in Connecticut. My first language was Mandarin and grew up and learned English with my parents.
How old were you?
Oh, just like born. As I was learning to speak, they were learning the language too. So we all learned together. I made me like the kind of the translator in a lot of ways for the family. So I grew up in Rochester, New York, upstate New York, home of the garbage plate, which sounds as delicious as it's so amazing. Didn't grow up in a Christian home.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think that shaped a lot of my early childhood views of myself, things like that.
How did that shape your identity?
I just grew up very aware that I'm different and I don't fit in the same way. I don't fit in with like the motherland, but I also don't really fit in with the culture around. So like, who am I even? I think it like led to this identity crisis.
Yeah.
I think there's a strong value in Asian culture for performing well and being the best. So, I quickly learned if you're not the best, then you're nothing. And I wasn't the best. And so I was nothing, which led to an identity crisis of sorts in middle school, high school, depression. Yeah, a friend noticed that I was depressed, having these existential like thoughts and stuff. And so she invited me to church. And I remember being there so awkward, like everybody's singing the same songs. Everybody knows the same songs and they all know the special claps. I don't know, like the childhood claps to the songs, worship songs. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, I don't know any of these, but also being so intrigued at the same time. Like they are singing to a God, their Father, who's with them in trials, who they really believe he would never leave them or forsake them, or that we are his beloved, like always, they really believe they're singing to somebody. So I stuck around for a little bit. I was too, I don't know, ashamed that I didn't know. So I like figured out the gospel on my own because I was just too weird about asking somebody for help walking with it. So I figured out the gospel, eventually became a Christian.
How old were you when you accepted Christ as your Savior?
I would say 14.
14.
Yeah, 14. We went to a Chinese Christian church. It serviced all like Mandarin speaking in the greater Rochester area. So it became like a little safe zone, home space for me, for all my other second generation Asian American, Chinese American, Taiwanese American friends in the area. I think I was drawn to the community. I think I was like more interested in the community at that point and having friends than actually walking with Jesus. I mean, I loved walking with Jesus and was led by the greatest advisors and everything. But I think me personally, I was like, friends, boys over there.
It's true though. Hey, you know what?
Jesus.
Whatever brings us in.
Whatever brings us in. Right? God needs anything.
Did your parents end up understanding who God was also? And
so we moved from Rochester to San Diego. So I've spent like half my life in Rochester, half my life in Southern California. Now that's where I live now with my husband. But my family moved from Rochester to San Diego. My parents, they were kind of rebuilding. My sister and I had a natural in with the local Chinese church. And so we were like, okay, we'll like go and visit and like try to build community there. My parents had nowhere to start. So they came to church with us just to meet new people, like just, get a foot in the door. And people invited them over for dinner, would share the gospel with them. They eventually came to faith. It was so cool. So, yeah.
Okay, so high school happens. And then does college happen, or where do you go from there?
Yeah, I actually did a little stint out here right now. We're in Chicago, Illinois. I did a little stint at Urbana-Champaign, which is only like 2 hours from here. My freshman year in college, I wanted to kind of go far away, launch. And then I went spread my wings, but then I went back home because I needed to get treatment for anorexia. I have a lot in my story. Yes. So I needed to get treatment for anorexia. My weight was really dangerously low by the time I left. And so I was brought home, did 5 weeks of inpatient treatment, and then a few more weeks, 10-week intensive outpatient treatment program. Needed a season of healing. I took a year off from school. I just felt like a loser, and like I'm behind, I'm already like dumb, but like now I'm a year behind it doesn't matter now looking back, but like at the moment it felt like I'm just the ultimate loser and disappointment.
Sure. It's like layers.
Yeah, layers of it.
Sometimes our depression or things that we have inside of us come out in different ways.
Yeah. Yes. So my eating disorder was like my like anxiety and trying to control my environment because I was in a new place. I had like my community wasn't there anymore. And so I was kind of on my own. I don't think I had the deep enough spiritual roots to thrive away from home. And then my family, like it's in that weird season in the middle treatment where my family moved from Rochester to San Diego, where I would continue treatment. So when I came time to go back to college, my family was like, we don't want to send you all the way back to Illinois. Like it's so far. What if something happens again? So I applied to a bunch of schools in the Southern California region. And the only one that would take sophomore transfers was a school called UC Irvine. I'd never heard of it before, but that's the path that God led me on. And that's where I met the Navigators, which is the organization that I work with now.
Okay.
If you don't know the Navigators, it's similar to University or Campus Crusade as collegiate ministry. So I met the Navigators and learned how to have roots, like have a relationship with Jesus. And I swear, God is so kind and a master author in writing our stories of pain to lead us to the right place at the right time. So I was at an all-time low, once I started at Irvine. I just gained like 40 pounds from treatment. So, I just didn't feel great. Was still really depressed and anxious, feeling like I'm a loser. I'm behind. I don't even know the school. What am I doing here? Just a lot of
purposelessness.
Yeah. Like, what am I doing here? But I just I needed Jesus. I needed to go deep in the word. I needed somebody to help me walk with Jesus. I needed help. I needed spiritual guidance. So that's what the Navigators are about. Disciple making ministry. Somebody discipled me and helped me learn that. Okay, so I had a lot of head knowledge about God, and that didn't change my heart. Obviously, it led to pride and puffing up. But I think somebody helping me learn to have a relationship with God really freed me from a lot of these. At the end of the year, I wasn't struggling with my eating disorders anymore. It became like later binge eating and then purging and everything, like all of it, restricting all of it, all the good stuff, when I wasn't doing that anymore. For the life of me on my own, I could not stop my eating disorders. But at the end of that year, just from walking with Jesus, it just looks back and it's like, oh, I'm not doing.
This isn't a temptation.
It's not a temptation anymore. Yeah, I'm not drawn to that anymore. So.
What's so beautiful about your story is that there's a thread, and it's you've been taken to places where you've been alone or feel alone, and you're learning how to adapt and how to walk bravely in it.
Yeah.
Whether it's within school, whether it's within church, whether it's within treatment.
Yeah.
You're so the resiliency was birthed out of you at 5 years old.
Yeah.
Learning English with your parents to then walking into a treatment center.
Yeah.
That's such a brave and bold thing to just accept the help and know that relationships are the thing that get you there. Relationships are the thing that fostered something in you at church.
Yeah.
And what brought you into knowing who Jesus is. And then relationships are what helped you in treatment. There's a common thread of walking in it, not knowing and feeling alone and finding community. What did you learn about vulnerability? Not right, because it's so, because I feel like you probably are an expert, but to open yourself up to receiving people or allowing people to see you in your hardest moments and in your darkest thoughts.
Yeah. My husband and I, we took a sabbatical 7 years ago, and it was like emergency sabbatical. At that time, I was reading Brene Brown. She's pretty much like the queen doctor of vulnerability. Read her book, The Gifts of Imperfection. Loved it. It transformed my life, and it showed me how vulnerability is really at the heart of living, like truly living, whether you're creating, like that takes vulnerability, whether you're playing, that takes vulnerability, feeling joy, that takes vulnerability, feeling pain, that takes, like life's deepest moments requires us to be vulnerable. And like, if you think about it, faith requires us to be vulnerable. Like it's hard. You can't like have a hard heart. That's kind of what I think of is like the opposite of vulnerable, like a hard and guarded heart. Yeah. And really have it be a bedrock of faith. Like faith requires for our hearts to be soft and for us to be unguarded and for us to really not know what the heck is going on, but I'm going to trust you, God, like I'm very vulnerable, I'm very vulnerable and anything could happen, but I'm going to trust you. And I think that's really where faith is born, vulnerability. Yeah.
So you said you're married.
Yep.
Do y'all have conversations about kids? Like where are this y'all's?
Yeah. When I first got married, I wanted 4.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we talked about 4. And then the closer I got to that like childbearing age, the more I started freaking out about it, where I'm like, no, I don't want to have kids. It's not fair. Like my life is going to end. You get to still have your adventures, but my life is going to end. And
I just want to pause. I feel like a lot of women identify with that.
Really?
I'm sure listening. So. I have a bonus mom, but still I thought my life was going to end.
Yeah. Like my career is going to end. My body is going to change for forever. Everything is going to end. And you still get to be handsome and like go have your adventures and work with college women that just keep getting younger and younger, or they stay the same age, but your life just keeps getting older. Just all these lies I think about motherhood and how it would ruin my life. And I think those were things that I heard just growing up about how kids like ruin your life, your marriage, your body, all of that. And so the closer I got to childbearing age, the more those fears started to really pop up, where it went from 4 kids to no kids. I don't want any kids,
Yeah.
But we did start trying to have kids, I think about 5 years into marriage, 5 years into around 30-ish, we started trying for kids, and mostly because we should. I'm about at that age. The first couple of years, no success. We didn't get pregnant. And so it's like, oh, well, that's really weird. We should probably look into that, and just got more testing done. And it was just unexplained infertility. We walked through infertility for a solid 7 years of our marriage of infertility before God gave us our 2 precious little ones. But it was a journey. And I think God used infertility to address these lies that I had about motherhood, to get me to the place where I wanted kids. I went from no, they're going to ruin my life, my body, my marriage, all that, to the longer I didn't have them, the more I wanted them. And then the more I was like, wait, why do I feel like they would ruin my life? Where is this coming from? And I feel like that's where God could enter in and bring his truth and point out maybe the origin story of some of those lies, where that came from was, I was firstborn. I think I came at not a great time in my parents' careers. My mom had to stop her PhD program. She had to stop her life. Stopped, and so it's that came from, I think, what I heard about me, and so that's where the Lord was able to enter into some of my wounding and my lies, I'm not wanted, or I need to prove that I'm worth existing, and to get me to that place where I wanted children. I've been wondering if God has been like wanting to break that generational lie or generational belief, to redeem it, to fit more like, no, children are a blessing from the Lord. I mean, I know that he used the infertility to get me to the place where I want my kids, and I'm so grateful for them. And there are moments where, yes, it's hard. I have to choose my kids over my career. And an earlier Alice would have, I think, resented the kids.
Yeah.
Motherhood, all of it, but I think me, older Alice now, like I'm just glad that they're here. I'm just glad that they're here. And when I get to that place where I'm like, I'm starting to resent, then it's like, no, but I waited for them for so, I'm just so glad that they're here. So
you shift your perspective from bitterness to gratitude.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you feel like the biggest lie was in your infertility season?
One of the biggest lies that I struggled with, especially in the early years of infertility, when it was really starting to get hard, was that it was my fault. And I think we as women, we're so much more tied to our cycles. It could be the guys, it could be like on the guy's side. But I just think I was the woman who is like tracking her cycle every month, taking temperatures. Like I just had so many lies about like, it's because of your eating disorder. It's because you were so selfish earlier and you messed with your body too much, and now your body can't carry life. And I think in the moment, it's like, God, don't you see us? Don't you hear us? Don't you care? And then this is where like my workspace versus gray space can sneak in. And this just highlights that, where I'm like, but God, we're in ministry. We do these things for you. Like, shouldn't we have a baby? Like, it all depends on what we do. And just like things are earned. It's not earned. Everything's a grace of God. Right. Yeah. But I think those were some ways that I really wrestled with. And then I just had a kind doctor at the end say like, oh, you think it's from that? Like, well, I'm just going to release you from that. If you're still getting your cycles, like your periods regularly, like that's not it. I'm just going to release you from that. You didn't mess up your body beyond hope. So,
that had to just feel free.
It felt so freeing to hear that from a doctor, because it was a doctor, not one of my regular doctors who was like, oh yeah, no, this is like what happened is because of your eating disorders, and this is it. Okay, bye. It was like a 2-minute touch in, and it was like, wait, what? So then I carried that with me as my faults. I did this to myself.
And that's exactly what the enemy wants to do. He wants to use our past to impact the way we see ourselves in the future with our relationship with Jesus. Yeah. And create a divide and live in that space.
Yeah. Yeah. So I started writing about our journey. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that's so weird about infertility in the middle of it is you don't know if there's going to be a happy ending. Like, you don't know what the ending's going to be. And so it's always just this wide open to be continued, like, God, are you going to answer? Are you not going to answer? And just years of being in the midst of just in the desert, right? In the barren deserts. Yeah. And at the same time, I felt like he was asking me to hold on to hope through it. Like these little nuggets of like, will you trust in me? Will you hope? Will you keep praying? So Psalm 73, it's like, my heart and my flesh may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. So, okay, God, if nothing else, will you be my portion? Like, are you enough? If nothing else, if I never have my baby, will you be enough? That I just like clung to, because month after month, you have this like painful bloody reminder that you're not pregnant, again, another month. Time is still ticking. Okay, I had a dream from before my husband and I met that I was like walking through a hospital and I heard a baby cry, and I knew it was my baby. I found her, and her name was Isabel, which is my middle name, Isabel. And she had kind of greenish hazel eyes, and I picked her up and held her, just kept saying, my Isabel, my Isabel. And I woke up because I was single then, and I was not ready to have kids. Nobody was on the radar, but I remember waking up sad that Isabel wasn't there. So as we're walking through infertility, I forgot about that dream. And I was at an infertility conference, and that dream came back to my mind, where I felt like God was asking me to hope. But it's when I was like, is this just what I want to hear about? Or is this falsehood? Is this falsehood? Is Isabel real? Am I a prophet? rarely had dreams like actually come to fruition. So I know it wasn't a prophet, but God, are you asking me to hope? And then, Mark, I think 11, where it talks about if you believe, even if you say to this mountain, I was like on a spiritual retreat, and I was up in the mountains and by a lake. And so like, it was very profound, like Jesus saying, if you believe and say to this mountain, like, be thrown into the lake, it'll happen, and I just felt like, God, are you asking me to trust you? It's been like 6 years of nothing.
Yeah.
You want me to trust you for biological kids? So I was at this conference where I was speaking, and a man, he connected with my husband because he connected with my story and wanted to get to know him. And my husband shared, we don't have kids. We've been trying for a while. And this man, he was like, oh, can I pray for your wife? Can I meet her and pray for your wife? And when my husband told me that, I was like, another person who wants to pray for my barren wound. Like, I've had so many people pray for my barren wound to open that, like, whatever. But sure, he could pray. And we met him and everything. And this was in a season. Okay, so we've just gone through our fourth and final IUI, which is infertility treatment. The one before the big boy IVF, right? And so we had exhausted our finances. I had just come back to full-time ministry with the Navigators. And so like in our ministry, everything that we own, everything we make is because people, they give to our ministry, right? Yeah. So I just left my job as a therapist, and my nice benefits, which covered infertility treatments. And I'm like, God, was this a mistake for me to come? Like, did we hear from you wrong for me to come back into full-time ministry? Do I go back and make money and like have benefits? And so I'm at this fundraiser that I'm speaking at, and this guy wants to pray over my womb, and I'm like, okay. And so we're just talking and getting to know each other, and then he offers to pay for us to do IVF.
Wow.
Yeah, which it is out of nowhere. And in California, IVF is like $25,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So he offers the stranger who heard our story and had compassion on us, offered to pay for us to do IVF.
And you pursued it.
And we pursued it. And went through with, and so he paid for most of it, and my husband's parents covered the rest. But yeah, no problem. We went through with it. I know. I just talk about like, God, you're the God who sees. Like, you're the God who sees Hagar. You're the God who sees me and the Christ of my heart. But even still, the IVF process, like, it increases your chance of getting pregnant, but it's still not a done deal. Like, there's still faith steps along the way. Like, if this part of IVF fails, then this whole thing will fail, and we're no kids. If this part fails, then we're back to square one. If this part fit, and so it felt like still this faith journey. Like, God, would you give us enough, but not too much? God, would you let this procedure work? And so we walked through the whole IVF process. We were able to have our son, who just turned 4, Reggie, named after Dad and Oba, and Clementine, who is 20 months old. And they're the cutest and the sweetest and the sweetest gifts of God. Yeah. I mean,
what a beautiful miracle story.
Yeah. God is crazy. I don't even,
I mean,
I never would have written that, I never would have that's just something that happens to people, and like, I don't know, shows or something. That doesn't happen to people in real life.
Well, I love your prayer. I wrote it down. Are you asking me to hope?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, that's a powerful prayer, because I think
be vulnerable.
I was about to say, going back to vulnerability, sometimes it's easy to go, you know what, I'll just accept and not hope for something big.
Yeah.
Out of fear that you'll withhold or you won't provide.
Yeah.
Some women that are listening right now, they may be in the middle of the 5 years that you were in, of the 7. And they may be wondering, like, oh, it's painful to hear that, because I'm not promised that on the other side.
Yeah, we're not. My husband and I, we were not promised. I know this is like a freak situation that, like, it doesn't happen to everybody, and it's like, what a gift that is. And also that it's not promised to us or to anybody. So, yeah.
During that infertility season, how did your community show up, and how did maybe people not show up that you wish would have? And I ask that because I think we don't know how to talk about infertility, and we don't want to like we don't want to, it's like the elephant in the room, but we also want to acknowledge the elephant because it's painful.
Yeah.
So like, what would you say, like, because I would love for me to learn and for anybody listening how to show up for a friend that's experiencing infertility.
Yeah. Oh man, I just think the greatest gift is presence, like just someone's presence with in the heat, in the darkness, somebody who like kind of like Job's friends, when they just sat with in the beginning, not try to explain or try to over spiritualize, but just to be with. So I think having a small group of people pray as you go through your procedures, pray for each step so that they know what's going on. And they, people would send meals, like just in the whole process, like just, we just had a transfer. So like, okay, here's a meal. We'll take care of dinner for tonight for you. And okay, so let me tell you, I did not know when I first started writing about infertility, like how God would answer.
Yeah.
And so when we announced our pregnancy, it was like the biggest celebration. I feel like these kids are the most wanted kids and prayed for. And that's my core. Like I'm unwanted. My life is a mistake. It ruins life, and so I still remember after I gave birth to my son, right after they like pull him out and my husband and I are crying and the baby nurse is there. And I shared what just really briefly, like, I've been walked through infertility and this is what he's been so like long waited for. And she says, he's so wanted. And I just felt like that was God seeing me again, like this whole, yes, he is so wanted. They're both so wanted.
I would love for you to speak to the woman that's listening right now that feels really scared to pray in hope.
Yeah.
And doesn't know how maybe to be fully vulnerable because she's scared that she could be rejected or denied. And that could be in this season of infertility. It could be in the season of waiting for a husband. It could be in the season of whatever she is experiencing right now, but maybe because of your journey, maybe it is infertility. But would you just speak to her?
Well, beloved, I would say that you will never fail if you put your hope in the Lord. It's so easy in this whole process to put our hope in the doctors and in the treatments and in the statistics and in the money and in the processes. But in the end, you will not fail if you put your hope in the Lord. My heart and, our spirits, our flesh, our bodies might fail, but God, if He is the strength of your heart, if He is your portion, that is enough. And you are enough. And you did nothing wrong. You did nothing wrong. This is just the reality of the broken world that we live in, the brokenness of our bodies, the brokenness of this world. But you did nothing wrong. You are enough. God is enough. And may He be the strength of your heart and your portion forever as you walk the lonely, dark path of infertility. And I promise you, He will not leave you or forsake you.
What a beautiful story. We know that not every infertility journey ends with becoming a parent of a biological child. So we want to take a minute to let you know that you are not alone. Well, before we go, be sure to check out our website to find a link for Alice's book, How to Save the World. You can find that and more at godhearsher.org. That's godhearsher.org. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget, God hears you, He sees you, and He loves you because you are His. Today's episode was engineered by Ann Stevens and produced by Jade Gussman and Mary Jo Clark. We also want to thank Barry and Kevin for all their help and support. Thanks, everyone. God Hears Her is a production of Our Daily Bread Ministries.